different. Uh, you know, there's a lot going on, but instead of me talking about that right now, let me do the first thing first. Let me introduce my co-host that does a fantastic job for the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce, and also obviously has her a show with on Mondays to Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, LaDonna, the incredible, the exceptional LaDonna Raeh. We can't hear you, LaDonna.
Probably because I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you now.
Uh, it's LaDonna Raeh, and I'm a proud member of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. And I want to tell you something. There's nothing like being a member of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. And I don't want to sound like an infomercial, so I won't. But I will say this, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, please share the show. Make sure you tune in each and every week at 9 o'clock on WVON 1690. Get the other mic. And if you're thinking about giving us a call, which I know you will, you can give us a call at 773-591-1690. But before we dive into this powerful discussion, I'm going to introduce my co-host, our co-host Larry, which is Lorenzo T. Hughes. But I think we want to get Nigel. Nigel has this update in Washington, and we're going to have to get to little known facts in just a second because he's trying to log in and I'm trying to get him in. I'm not used to the phone here. So definitely want to get him in. But Larry, I have a question for you. A lot has been happening in Chicago, even though we had a holiday. Can you give us a little bit of insight on what this show is about today?
Well, this show is going to be about, a perspective. It's always important for us to understand that even though we say all politics are local, what happens in Washington, D.C. Trickles down to all of us at some level, and it has an impact. So it's important for us to have an incredible person like Nigel's and Phoenix Strategy to come and talk to us about what's happening on Capitol Hill. That's an insight perspective that we really appreciate his firm. But we're also going to be talking about some of the solutions in terms of how we need to come together. I think we're going to close out the show about coming together. So we're going to get a perspective on Capitol Hill, what's going on with our incredible good friend Nigel Stevens and the great firm that he represents. And he is one of the, obviously, the owner of Phoenix Strategies. So we're excited to have him on, LaDonna. And, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Now, Lorenzo, I'm going to see if we can hear you. Lorenzo, go ahead. Yeah, can you hear him, Larry?
No, I can't. I can't hear him yet.
Speak up. Yeah, there we go. We should be able to hear you now. All right. So anyway, as you know, Larry has, or should I say, Lorenzo's been coming on as our human rights consultant with those little known history facts, and they're not just history facts; they're Black history facts as they pertain to business. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say because these short, little known history, Black history facts, they kind of get you going and thinking about things in a different perspective. Welcome to the show, Lorenzo.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Can you hear him?
It's always a pleasure to
No, we
speak
can
with
barely
you.
hear him, LaDonna.
Because he's talking really low. I think he's talking really
Hello,
low.
hello. I'm right up on the mic.
Okay, you're
So,
still
I'm right
kind
up
of
on the
low.
mic. Can you hear me?
Why don't we do
yeah.
this, LaDonna? Why don't we go ahead and get Nigel on? Let's come back to Lorenzo a little bit later if we can get to Mike. So we can't hear him, and I know he got some pretty important things he want to share with us
I
and a
know.
little known
I
history
can't wait.
fact.
Okay. I can't wait. All right, Nigel. First of all, you're no stranger to this show. The good thing is that when you come, you bring the facts. And Nigel is with Phoenix Strategies, and I'm scared to ask what are the updates when it comes to what's going on in Washington.
Well, good morning, LaDonna. Thank you very much for having me. Dr. Larry Ivory, thank you as always. I appreciate your leadership and I appreciate you welcoming me on the show. And it's a pleasure to be here on Saturday morning. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. So, there are a couple updates I want to give to you guys. There's some legislative activities that are happening right now. We need folks to be aware of and engage on. And then we also have some regulatory changes that are affecting businesses, not only government contractors, but also all businesses around the country. So, first, the Department of Labor recently finalized a rule that streamlines how businesses can determine whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor, right? So this applies to all businesses. So please look into this. Basically, it's, a lot of folks either have W-2 employees where they're paying, a lot of the taxes on the employee taxes and so forth, versus a 1099 independent contractor. So they've streamlined it and put the weight on two significant factors over at Department of Labor: how much control the business has over the work that's being done, and whether the worker has a real chance to make a profit or a loss. So what does that really mean? So you can consider a worker an independent contractor if that worker controls the work being performed, if they can accept or decline the work that they choose to do, if they can set or negotiate their compensation, if they manage their own schedule, if they can market their services to multiple clients, not just one employer, if they can hire their own helpers, if they can invest in tools and equipment that they need to do the work that's being done, so they are investing in their own materials and tools and equipment, and if they can make business decisions that affect profit and loss. So as they're going through, like, what determines whether or not somebody should be considered a independent contractor or not. So those are some of the factors that you should look into. So these are things that can affect all businesses, but particularly small businesses, as they are trying to figure out how to manage their organizational structure and how they go to market with their workforce. What portion needs to be W-2 employees and what portion needs to be 1099 independent contractors. So that affects all businesses.
Hey Nigel, let me chime in real quick because that's pretty significant in terms of what you just laid out. Because some people could be in trouble on a number of fronts because normally the litmus test that people have used is that if they don't work at your office, even though they can come in, they set their own time. But you laid out a number of other factors that people may not be meeting the test. So if they don't do that, what's the consequences of that?
Well, this now determines, of course, how you pay your payroll taxes and other factors, right? So are you categorizing those employees accurately when you go to file your business taxes, and are you making sure you're meeting all the compliance requirements for your business? So this had to be really streamlined because as the workforce changes, and as folks are working from home, hybrid work environments, you have workers who are doing things like ride share services and things like that. Delivery services. Are those folks considered employees of that business, or are they independent contractors? So if somebody is driving Lyft, Uber, and DoorDash and providing their services to different folks, are you an employee of DoorDash, or are you an independent contractor that can then do the services and choose whether or not you're picking up and delivering something? What does that mean? Was that?
Seems simple. It seems simple. It seems like, okay, if I want to work today, I opt in to work today. But if I'm a W-2 employee, I am expected to be there on a schedule. There's a certain number of hours that I must work in order to be that employee versus the DoorDash or the independent contractor that you've laid out. Correct? Is it that simple?
Correct.
Cut and
So
dry?
yes, so that is a very simplistic version that I created there, because we all know DoorDash
Okay.
and Uber and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now think about the complexity when it comes to an accounting firm that has a team of CPAs that provide service for different businesses. Think of it as what happens when you have a landscaping company, and is somebody an employee, or are they independent contractor because they have their own equipment, they have their own lawnmowers and weed whackers and things like that they can then offer services to others, and they will, I can call them if I need them to do a project or something. So really it's up to the business owner to look into it and learn more about, and figure out and talk to their accountant and their lawyer and figure out what the best option is for them, because this could have significant positive and potential negative IRS implications. So they should really look into that.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah, we need that. That's just something, but it does. This new rule does give a little bit more flexibility and more clarification than what we had, which was a multi-step, I think like 6-level process that was under the past administration.
Now, do you have to have a EIN number versus a social security when you're an independent contractor?
That depends on your W-9. So you can pay someone as a contractor, as a independent, with a social security number. Because I've
Okay.
done that with folks who've done, offhand contracting. Somebody built my website, right? So they were
Hmm.
just doing a side gig for me, but I paid them, and then they gave me a W-9 with their social security number because they hadn't set up a formal business yet, but they still have to report it on their taxes. So that again, we're starting to get into that area where you really should have a conversation with your accountant and understand where that really affects your business. Now, a couple more things I want to get to because I know you guys had some conversations in the last show about some of the regulations dealing with the DBE, the Disadvantaged Business Entity Program, and the 8A program, and I want to share some updates on that. So there is a new proposed rule that has been sent from the Small Business Administration to the Office of Management and Budget for review for the 8A program. This new proposed rule would essentially put into the Code of Federal Regulations what has already been determined by the courts. So it would eliminate what we call the rebuttable presumption. The presumption that if you fall into a certain race category, you are presumed to be socially disadvantaged when defining whether or not you can get into the program, and you have to calculate social disadvantage and economic disadvantage. Okay, so this is a significant change from the old 8A program, but not a significant change based on what has just come from the courts that have overturned the rebuttable presumption. This is why companies that are in the 8A program needed to write a narrative to explain why they are socially disadvantaged, and all new applicants or independently owned companies, of individually owned companies, need to write a narrative to explain their social disadvantage and then show their economic disadvantage. But there's one caveat here. This rebuttable presumption, there's an entire paragraph in the Code of Federal Regulations that literally lists racial classifications, and that's what they want to eliminate. But it does not apply to what is called entity-owned 8A companies. What are entity-owned 8A companies? These are tribal organizations. These are Alaska Native corporations. These are Native Hawaiian organizations that are owned by the members of the tribe that are shareholders of the company. So instead of it being tied to Nigel as a independent 8A applicant, and my social security number is tied to that as the sole owner, 51% owned and controlled of that business, this is multiple owners that apply, that this applies to. So there is a different set of the rebuttable presumption standards, right? So understand what that means. And I know, Larry, you guys have done a lot of work with tribal organizations, really successful work with tribal organizations. So business owners understand, take some time to understand what that means for your business relationships, your contractual requirements, but also what you're going to have to do as an individual that's applying to the 8A program as compared to an entity owned 8A company. Okay, so the next thing is dealing with the federal side, the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. That's a mouthful. That is the legislation that authorizes the Department of Transportation programs that governs roads, bridges, highways, tunnels, all of those large on-the-ground transportation projects. That also, Surface Transportation also deals with your formula grants that goes to your local rail projects and so forth, right? Your transit systems and so forth. The Disadvantaged Business Entity Program, DBE program, has been authorized in that legislation since its inception. This this last week, the surface transportation bill was passed through the committee. The reauthorization was passed through the committee, and it included a continuation of the DBE program. It continued the authorization of the DBE program. However, it did include it in the new form based on the court decisions. So it does not include the specific race or gender language that was in the previous authorizations, numerous authorizations, but it does authorize the existence of the program. So folks who want to participate in the DBE program must still write a narrative and explain their disadvantaged status, because that rebuttable presumption is gone. However, the program still is able to continue and move forward in a race and gender neutral environment.
So, Nigel, I want to take a step back and get into the weeds just a little bit on this subject. When you talk about the presumption that women were considered economically disadvantaged from day one, and now we can't use ethnicity in terms of getting DB certified. My question stems from the fact that, say, for example, Illinois Department of Transportation, and we take a look in every, I think, Department of Transportation throughout the United States ought to take a look at the numbers, because what I'm concerned with is that if some people aren't getting certified, I mean, there's two pathways here when you talk to the Department of Transportation. Like, number one is that some people aren't reapplying. They decided we're not going to go through it, and there's some numbers reflecting that. And there are some who applied and couldn't get certified, and you have to go back and try it again and figure out what you did wrong in order to make it happen. What we ought to understand, in my opinion, is there a disparity between women, Asian, Hispanics, and African Americans in terms of who's applying, who's getting approved? Because that'll tell us, because I would think that women would have a harder time proving economic disadvantage as a rule of thumb, white women especially. And I wonder if it's reflecting in the number of people who are getting recertified. Now, in some cases, maybe it's not, but it gives us some ideal, at least, to kind of start with and say, is there a bigger problem? Because if African Americans on a higher percentage aren't applying and are getting rejected at a higher level, then we have a systematic problem that we need to address based upon the data, right?
So let me clarify. First, we don't have that data. We don't have the data yet on what the results have been, because this is an active process of individual states recertifying existing DBEs, or those reapplying, and then at the same time new applicants, right? So this is happening in real time. But I want to clarify, this wasn't the economic disadvantage. This is the social disadvantage determination. So remember, it's a two-part process: the socially and economically disadvantaged. So the rebuttable presumption simply eliminates the assumption that because you are in a race or gender category that was determined, that was listed in this paragraph in the Code of Federal Regulations, that therefore you don't need to show your social disadvantage. It is presumed that you are, and then you have to go through the process like everybody does to show economic disadvantage. So it's a two-step process. Now, why is that important? Because the courts have determined that the original justification of why you needed that presumption was because the programs were created to mitigate the impact of past and existing discrimination that resulted in economic disadvantage. And so the assumption now is that discrimination no longer exists. We're in an equal society. You know, the I'm the impacts of past discrimination and the legal discrimination by government
Hey,
entities.
hey, Nigel, I got to stop you.
I'm trying
How do
to.
you get to those numbers, Nigel? I mean, when you say it no longer, but when I take a look at the numbers, just like we talked about in terms of federal contracting with African Americans, Hispanics, and Caucasians, the disparity exists significant. So, how do you arrive at? I mean, how does the courts arrive at? I'm not, you're an attorney, so I mean, I should ask you this question: how do they arrive at the fact that when I take a look at departments of transportation, school districts, everything I can see, that I see white women, Hispanics, Asians, and I see us at the lowest level of participation that exists. So, how did we arrive at the fact that there is no longer racial discrimination and therefore we don't need, and I understood the ultimate goal for all of us was that we would have a race neutral society where it wouldn't matter any longer. And when that came, it was going to make a lot of sense, and I would agree with him. But I don't think we got there yet.
So I'm not an attorney, and I don't even play one on TV, at least not well.
Yeah.
So, this is. I'd have to go back into the language of the actual findings of the court case on this one, but um, the reality is that the intent was to try, yes, to try to get to a race neutral environment. Absolutely.
Sure.
Um, but that's why we were having things like disparity studies. That's why
Hmm.
we collected the data locally, not just national generic information, right? You had regions that were cities, states, counties that were doing their own independent disparity studies to show the facts of exactly what you're talking about. So that is the rub of where we are in this environment right now. So how do we now show social disadvantage? It now has to be on an individual case by case basis. So you as an individual need to write a narrative of why you have been socially disadvantaged and then qualify to enter the socially disadvantaged versus economically disadvantaged as a result of that social disadvantage.
You know
So
what?
that's what they've done. They've simply shifted it to an independent responsibility. Now it's on you to show your individual case, and it's determined, as we can see with these narratives, on a case by case basis.
The women's rights movement really messed things up for this, in my opinion. Women were out there talking about burn your bras, okay? And in that they wanted equal pay, equal employment opportunities, equal rights to vote, all of those things, equality. But now there's a disadvantage because you're a woman. I mean, can we make up our minds? I'm just saying.
Well, the women's rights movement was the equivalent of civil rights movement, where you acknowledge that equality was the goal, not where you're starting from,
Right.
right? And if we haven't gotten there yet, then how do we mitigate the discrepancy? How do we address the issue, right? And
But
we've
but
heard, look, we've
but
seen
have
folks
we?
on Capitol
Are you
Hill, I've
are you?
witnessed members say that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was race neutral. Civil Rights Act of 1965 was race neutral. It wasn't until Lyndon Johnson implemented Executive Order 11246 to now implement affirmative action to now address the gaps that have been created by that discrimination, that was the problem, right? So it's, you can address, you can acknowledge that discrimination exists and there's a disparity as a result, but what are you going to do about it?
Absolutely.
So that's the
All right.
question. That's the question of the rub of the hope of the American dream for all of us, right? And making sure that we are always working towards a more perfect nation, right? We're always working and always, this uh, uh, test case of democracy that we've been living through for 250 years. We're not there yet, and it's going to be a constant struggle. But that idea of, you want equality, burn your bras. Yes, you want equality, and progress has been made,
Yeah.
and we stand on the shoulders of giants that did a lot of the work to get us to this point. But there's a reason why McKinsey could point to the undoubted financial success of corporations that have diverse boards of directors, the unquestionable financial success of companies that have diversity of gender and race and all different points of view and backgrounds and experiences in leadership roles in C-suite of corporations. Those companies perform better financially. That's not me, that's McKinsey. Those are independent studies. That's Harvard Business School. have shown by the fact that these companies do better when you add diverse thoughts and ideas and visions and leadership styles to an organization. So that's the type of progress that we had been making in the last 50, 60, 70 years. And we need to figure out how we can continue making that in our new and making that progress continue in our new environment.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So
LaDonna. You were trying to chime in. We want to give you the. Go ahead. LaDonna had a
something. I just want to make sure you
question.
guys hear about the rule of two, because this is something that affects all small businesses, and we should definitely weigh in and make sure it stays. So the House Small Business Committee marked up legislation and moved it through on codifying the rule of two. This is a very particular rule that is a great opportunity for all small businesses. Basically, it requires contracting officers that if their market research shows that there are two or more small businesses able to perform a project, perform work, or provide services or tools or products to the government above the micro purchase threshold. So the micro purchase is anything under $15,000, right? They can use credit cards in small purchases, all the way up to $350,000. Anything in that window, if there are two or more small businesses capable of doing the work, it would require the contracting officer to make that a small business set aside. If we can get this to stay to be put into the law and be codified, this is something that's been in regulations for decades, but it has not been codified. If we can get this codified, it is a real opportunity to get all small businesses to participate, or opportunity to participate in federal contracting, to bring, again, all the benefits that more competition brings to any marketplace: lower prices, innovative products and services, more and things that more competition brings. So we should definitely weigh in with your member of Congress, saying that you need the rule of
Ronald.
legislation to stay and pass through Congress to make sure small businesses get greater opportunity and the U.S. government gets the benefit of more competition.
What impact could this have on black-owned businesses that are seeking federal contracts?
You're more likely to be small. You're more likely to fall into that small business category, right? So that's the question of how are you going to participate. So now, if you're not going to be an 8A company and you're not going to be a DBE, if you're going to start, not going to, Larry said some of them are not choosing not to go through that certification process. You can still be a small business, certified small business with the Small Business Administration. Right? So you can go after and compete for these contracts if you can show that you and another or two or three companies are available in that whatever market space to provide whatever product or service the government's looking for within that window of 15,000 to 350,000. So it's a real opportunity for all businesses.
So we
And,
really
and
need to
not,
build some relationships. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
but
also,
Nigel, I think the other side I want to get to is that we have to define what the SBA say small business is, because it means that majority business can't compete for those contracts. So you give smaller business an opportunity to actually go and pursue contract opportunities where they're not competing against someone that's a multi-billion dollar company that significantly has a competitive advantage in terms of scaling and being able to buy supply resources and everything else. So it really kind of it allows more small businesses to come and pursue it, knowing that someone of size and scope and perhaps even more experience are not going to be competing for those same contracts.
and now remember, this is what falls under the simplified acquisition threshold of 350,000. You still have opportunities for set asides for 8A, woman owned, service disabled, veteran owned, hub zone firms. If you're certified in any of those, which Larry, I know we want to talk about that, about how to really leverage and create opportunities for our veterans that may be looking for somewhere else to certify if they're not going to be 8A or DBEs. But you can still have set asides above that 350,000 if you're a part of these other certification programs, absolutely. But within that window, this is a great window for smaller firms to be able to provide goods and services to the federal government without having to be in that larger capacity level.
Nice.
So let's get to Nigel. As a veteran myself, there is some real advantages Because I remember under the Robert Gorovich administration, I was a part of the task force who helped set the helped set the veteran goal, and I was a part of that team who set the 3% veteran goals for the state of Illinois, and that was many years ago. It hasn't changed, and we're still not, quite frankly, hitting those marks because when we take a look at procurement and you have a veteran goal on it, we're still not getting that participation. But it is an enormous opportunity because there's so much opportunity and so little participation for those who are veterans and you have not certified yourself as a veteran-owned business. You are missing out on an opportunity where there's not a lot of competition.
Well, first of all, Larry, thank you for your service and thank all the veterans for their service. And particularly as we are coming out of the Memorial Day weekend, thank you all for your service and we appreciate all the sacrifice you made. And as a result of that sacrifice, I cannot say enough about the need for folks who have the ability, who have that qualification to certify as a service disabled veteran owned business. But there's also some pending opportunities. There have been attempts in the last couple of years, whether it's through the National Defense Authorization Bill or in a number of other bills, to try to attach a government-wide veterans program that would have a 5% goal for utilization, that would have set aside opportunities, that would have limited competition opportunities. And Congress is still trying to figure out how to get that to work. That they're, at the Department of Veterans Affairs, they have a veterans preference already, and it's working rather well. They're actually carrying the load for the majority of the federal government in order to try to get to that goal. But trying to get to that, we need more companies. If you are an individual, 51% owned and controlled company that was in the DBE program, and you're a veteran or you're a service disabled veteran, look to certify your company in that way. This is a race and gender neutral pathway for you to create opportunities for your business. And so we don't even have to go down that road with the current administration and the current environment that they're creating. Take advantage of the opportunity that's there. And I've said this before, you can certify in multiple different programs. If you're a service disabled veteran and you locate your business, your headquarters in a hub zone, and you hire 35% of your employees from a hub zone, it doesn't have to be in the same hub zone that your headquarters is in, right? Then you can be a hub zone firm as well, historically underutilized business zone. That's creating jobs in underserved communities, right? So there are a number of other options that business owners, look, business owners are creative, they're innovative, they know how to pivot and get to the money and get to the contracts in order to grow their business. This is the time to do exactly that, to pivot and figure out where you need to go, what shifts you need to do in order to make sure your business remains successful.
All right, I have a question from the audience. I'm currently working on my DBE narrative. Would your guests recommend I lean into stories that demonstrate lack of access to capital? Moreover, should I avoid mentioning race at all as a factor? And
So,
that's from Lori. Thank you, Lori.
so access to capital is one of the clear factors, right? They've talked about things like, uh, the environment you grew up in, the community you grew up in, any challenges that you may face there. But whether or not you mention race, that is a very complicated question. A lot of folks are saying no, do not include it at all. You really should seek some advice on that, particularly to your state and whichever entity is reviewing your application for certification. That gets very complicated, but that's something you should definitely look into.
Now,
Yeah,
Larry, we were on a meeting, Larry, where they said don't lead with race, but it could be mentioned. Do you recall that meeting, Larry?
yeah, I recall that meeting.
Yeah.
And my advice to the caller is that if they were to give their chamber a call, we can get the Illinois Department of Transportation, Brandy, who's over the OBWB, the Office of Workforce Diversity, just doing a good job in what she's doing, to get clarity for her to make sure that she's not wasting time going to get her application rejected before it gets out the gate. So they're not going to tell her exactly, but they can give her some ideas. And normally, if she simply makes the same case without even putting color in there, that based upon the fact she's applied for loans several different times and were turned down, that should get her that should get her to the finish line. But we'd be more than happy to have an offline conversation if she wants to call the chamber office at 309-740-4430. She can give us a call and we can have a conversation and we can get someone that can help her through that process that doesn't cost her anything at all, but they'll help her through the process to make sure that she gets the counsel and advice she needs in order to be successful in getting her DBE certification.
So, Larry, you touched on something I wanted to, I don't want to, I know, LaDonna, you said you don't want to sound like a commercial, and I'll say it, right? In these times, and you saw I had a little bit of difficulty answering one of those questions, you need to lean in. Business owners, I'm talking directly to you. If you are not a member of one of your local organizations, Urban League, Black Chamber, whatever it may be, local chamber of commerce, you need to really lean in. Circle K, any of these groups that are monitoring and tracking and trying to provide services. I know that Larry, you've had some conversation, minority supplier development councils, this is not the time to try to go at it alone.
Absolutely.
We need to lean in to our organizations, our local organizations, so you can get better guidance about what is happening in your local community, because your application is not going to be reviewed by somebody in Washington. It's going to be somebody in the state of Illinois that is going to review all of your applications and certifications in order to meet the Illinois requirements. And so let me just also clarify something. If Illinois is your home state and you're a DBE certified and you're recertifying and you're trying to write these narratives, you cannot get your certification renewed in any other state until you are renewed in your home state. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be your priority. So you need to make sure that your certification is authorized and renewed in the state of Illinois, if that's your headquarters, before you go about trying to deal with and invest the time and effort into renewing your certification if you're doing work in other states. So definitely lean into your local organizations. They're here to help.
Hey, well, we appreciate that, and I'll simply say this real quick, is that if ever there's a time for people to unite and come together, the time is now. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, of why that's so important. But LaDonna, I don't know if we have any of the callers, but I'm going to pass it back to you.
Absolutely. Lorenzo's on the line. He's going to give us his real quick, little known history fact.
Okay.
As you know, Lorenzo is the human trafficking consultant that we have on each and every week. So, Lorenzo, back to you, or to you, I should say. Welcome. And thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
No, Nigel, don't hang up because we're still going.
Okay.
We'll come back to you.
Lorenzo, you there? All right. We have a.
Oh, there we go. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was trying to make some notes, to this little known Black history fact, but I'm going to try to just go ahead and jump, right into it. Once again, I'm always happy to be on the Wake Up Show with you and LaDonna. I appreciate you guys having me on, and hey, I'm glad to hear you as well, Nigel. As I was looking over this and listening to you guys talk, I was kind of throwing in some little notes I wanted to kind of throw in there with what I had. I know we tend to talk about small business and its importance in our ability to give and how it gives us power to build and make decisions, lobby, employ those in our community, and to be self-sufficient. Now, I was looking at this history fact here where in 1865, Black people actually received reparations after the Civil War was won over slavery, with Abraham Lincoln approving reparations in the form of 400,000 acres of land to be given to former enslaved Blacks in the South. With that wealth handed down, it would have allowed us to build a thriving Black business community. But this led to him being to Lincoln being assassinated and reparations being reversed by Vice President Andrew Johnson. Um, the Democratic Party that was founded in 1828 became the party that defended and protected slavery in the United States and supported the expansion of slavery into the United States, or the divided states, as I like to call them, where some Southern Democrats formed the Confederate States of America, whose founded documents explicitly protected slavery. Now, slavery and black dependency, not independency, was a must for the Democratic Party's economy to thrive and for them to stay in power. Its goal was never for black self-sufficiency and the ability to survive without them. So this leads me to ask the question, how much does this have to do with blacks being aligned with this party since 1964, and our conditions not getting any better or worse when we start to look at black business? We have to become more dependent. We have become more dependent on black assistance, handouts and welfare, which started with President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which only allowed you to qualify if the fathers or men was removed from the home. So again, we have to do what it is that we do best, and that's to do our own thing and take our families back, to start supporting black business and black business organizations. So stop building the wealth and power of those who don't support the efforts of small business and self-sufficiency, and that's our little known black history fact. And thank you guys again.
Hey, thanks, Lorenzo. Lorenzo makes a interesting point, but I think the dynamics of history has changed dramatically in terms of the Southern Democrats and the Republican Party, the evolution, because the Southern Democrats back then was pro-slavery, and it was the Republicans who were a little less anti-slavery. That has flipped dramatically, and there's been times in history where we saw that flip. I don't know if, Nigel, you want to add anything to it, but it's a different time. That may be where we started, but we surely aren't in the same place. And we need to understand from a historical basis what happened and why did we shift. And I think it's important for us to understand that from a historical point of view.
So
I
this,
guess one of my biggest questions before you jump in, Nigel, is how are we voting as we come upon another time where we have to cast our votes? How are we voting when it comes to business? When we go to that booth and we cast our vote, how is our vote being cast with the efforts to improve our ability of empowerment and self-sufficiency when we go into the voting booths?
so let me address the first part, because that's a bit of a and Larry, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because that's a bit of a red herring when folks start talking about the history of black folks being Republicans versus Democrats, because the States' Rights Democratic Party was what was then informally referred to as the Dixiecrats, right? The Southern Democrats, led by Strom Thurmond, who was nominated to be their presidential candidate. And they formally separated from the party in 1948. And then you saw that strengthen after the series of civil rights acts were passed and the final break of Lyndon Johnson and those folks now separating and then moving over to what is our now Republican Party. So since the 60s, that has been a complete shift of what you define a Democrat as versus what you define a Republican as. Those Southern former Democrats have made it explicit they are solidly red Republicans. That's the end of the story. So trying to go back and say what it was like under Lincoln, very different situation of what we are living in right now. So we want to clarify that. So we can't say, well, we should be voting Republican because the old Democratic Party supported slavery. That hasn't been accurate since 1960.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a misnomer, and it would be an actual misrepresentation, in my opinion, of our current situation, because politics is voting for your interests. And from a black business perspective, it's always about what's in our best business interest. But when you get rid of, you gutting DEI and all these other programs, and civil rights and all the other things, it you know, it speaks to an issue of intentionality of my best interests. If I'm a white male, maybe Trump maybe fits my agenda to some degree if I believe in certain factors. So I'll yield back to you, Nigel, because I know we don't have a lot of time.
LaDonna's giving me there's a phone call, I think.
But let Nigel go first, and the phone call come second. Go ahead, Nigel.
Just very quickly, with regards to the second part, that that is number one, voter turnout, because you can't talk about what needs to happen from a business perspective and independence and so forth when you have 30% voter participation. Okay, so we need a high voter turnout. Folks need to wake up and pay attention and participate. Whoever you're voting for, get to know what it is that they're standing for and get out and participate. If you don't participate, you have no grounds to complain. And quite honestly, the outcome is just as much your fault as somebody who voted, in my opinion, the wrong way. So get out, get educated, understand what's on the table, and participate first. Second, the question about voting for your interests, Larry, is the exact point. Now, there are a lot of issues outside of business. I know we're talking about business here that are directly impactful to business. I can't run my business effectively if I have no access. If you're eliminating, when the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau eliminates the protections against racial discrimination, all right, protections on racial discrimination in lending, that makes it more difficult for people like me and people who look like me to get loans, right? Those are the challenges that we are going to be facing. So there are other things, voting rights, voter suppression, shifting of districting maps, redistricting, and all the challenges that we're facing right now that eliminate representation for certain populations, right? Those are all major challenges that are not specific to business, but will affect my ability, your ability, everyone's ability to run their business. But keep in mind something. Let's for a second take because you talked about what a white male would be interested in with Trump. Let's take all of that off the table for a second. Let's talk business. 95% of the businesses in America have less than 100 employees. They are small businesses. So the businesses that are creating the jobs in your community, that are paying payroll, those are small businesses. And what are we doing to implement policies to create competition environments, trade environments, tax environments, all the things that we need to help those businesses compete and thrive so they can provide goods and services to our local communities and continue to create jobs and economic growth? If you focus on that part, you will reach a lot of and diverse communities, race and gender neutral, but you will still reach a lot of those communities that need the most help by simply helping that business community grow and thrive. I just had a conversation with a local elected official yesterday. We cannot property tax our way to prosperity. You can't, right? You can't tax homeowners, right, to pay for all the roads and bridges and tunnels and hospitals and all the things that our community needs. And school districts, right? You must have a thriving business community. And if the majority of those businesses are small businesses, then we have to shift our focus, and we need to demand that our leaders shift their focus on where they're incentivizing, where they are incentivizing the growth. Because that's the way we're going to be able to. It's going to be competition. It's going to be innovation. It's going to be coordination and communication. But those are the things that grow a thriving business marketplace and allow for the local economies to grow. And when the local economies are strong, it grows your national economy, and that will grow your global competitiveness.
All right. We can grab these callers real quick. I'm not sure how much time we have, but let's go ahead and grab Mark. Mark, thank you
Yeah.
so much for waiting. Real quick, what do you have to say to the Wake Up Show Chicago?
So when I hear people talk about the fifth, I mean, the fifth doesn't matter to us. Our people created the Republican Party, and that we don't control our own destiny. But whichever way you go, if you allow them, or your mind tells you that they own it and you don't, then you won't benefit anyway. So This is about us getting in front of our community and saying that we're gonna go back to God, country, and family, which what our people created, which is the Republican Party that was started by our people. It wasn't started by a bunch of white guys in the North. No, it was started in the South.
All
They
right,
followed our lead. They followed theirs.
thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to Smoking Joe real quick. Hey, Smoking Joe, get it in real quick. Welcome to the Wake Up Show.
Yeah,
It's
be
gonna be
smoking, Joe.
real quick. One of the solutions to our problem in Chicago and the world among black people is the absence of love. Love is a profound, emotional, strong affection, attachment, and deep care for one another. It is a strong affection for one another rising out of kinship or personal ties. It's a selfless, active commitment to the well-being of another. We're missing love. And
All
when I
right.
say that real quickly,
Yeah.
we gotta love each other enough to do business with one another in our families, in our communities. The man on your station alluded to that a few seconds ago.
All right. Thank you.
Most
Thank you so
people,
much. I gotta leave it there. I'm sorry. I gotta get to Pianki. Thank you, Pianki. You're on the Wake Up Show.
You know, the key thing on obtaining contracts is very simple. It's the bottom line. How the structure still erected. If I wanted to put up signage, I could bid signage and do it for cars. And that's basic. DVE just keeps a record of who's doing things. I done jobs in Illinois. It was not even a DVE of Illinois. It's the bottom line. Help young contractors to be able to finance and also get the experience where they can move up in the spectrum of their work category. That's where it counts.
All right. Thank you, Pianki. I want to yield back to the panel here. We got, of course, guys, you've been listening to the Wake Up Show Chicago. We come on each and every week at 9 a.m. We have on the line with us or on stream. You can see us on Facebook Live and YouTube. You'll see that we have Nigel Stevens, who is with Phoenix Strategies, who gives us our updates in Washington. And, of course, our dear Dr. Larry Ivory. Lorenzo is on the line. Lorenzo T. Hughes is on the line, and myself, LaDonna Raeh. But I want to give you guys the closing floor.
Let me say this real quick, and I will give the last couple minutes to Nigel. I serve on I'm the chair of the procurement committee for Peoria, Illinois, District 150, and we were having a conversation about the diversity of our school district, and we pointed out the fact that 80% of the school district is minority. But when we take a look at the participation, we find that we're getting less than 3%. And it was amazing that even Caucasian people who sit on the board were not aware of the fact, and they were astonished at the fact that for 120 years we've had less than 3%, but our funding mechanism is based upon our students. And I asked them, is there a correlation between crime and education? And the question is, yes, there is. Then my point that I make is that if racism and bigotry costs billions and trillions of dollars, to have a market that's competitive, to let everybody raise based upon their ability, where you can be judged by the content of the character, not by the color of the skin, is really the best ideal of America to push for us working together and make it happen. So I yield back to you. I wish we had more time to talk about that, but I'll yield back to you,
Yeah, we have no
Nigel.
time. Go ahead, Nigel.
So very quickly, I just want to wrap up and thank you again for having me. I just want to remind everyone. So a couple things to pay attention to and take some time to go and research. The surface transportation reauthorization legislation is going to be coming to the floor of the House of Representatives in the next couple weeks. It does include the disadvantaged business program in it. It does include the 10% aspirational goal. So it still maintains that. It is constitutional in our current environment. It is race and gender neutral. So please, Ms. Westerfield, please do your narrative, write your application, get yourself certified, and continue to participate. They need numbers. The government needs more competitors, more businesses to provide services and goods to them in order to get the best value. So please do not walk away from that. The program is still up and running, so please continue to participate. For those who want to participate in federal government contracting, please call your member of Congress, reach out to them and say, you need the rule of two that will create opportunities for small businesses, all small businesses, to participate in federal contracting for contracts between $15,000 and $350,000. It's a great entry point, an opportunity to get your foot in the door, to start working with the federal government and grow your business from there. And then finally, please look into this new Department of Labor rule that determines how you define an employee versus an independent contractor. It could create real flexibility and opportunities for your businesses. So please reach out and find out more about that.
Thank you, Chicago, for listening every Saturday morning. As stated, join the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. Go to ilbcc.org and make sure you hit the join button and join us as a member. Membership has its benefits. We're on the Wake Up Show Chicago each and every Saturday, if I didn't say it before. And you know what? Shout out to Lorenzo T. Hughes, because he had a snafu. He's in a play. He's on his way to the DuSable Museum to do As We Lay. So he's playing a really nice part. So check him out.
Shout out Lorenzo.
That's right. That's right. All right, guys, we're out of here, and I'll see you Monday on the afternoon show, WVON 1690. Bye-bye for now.
Follow us across the socials at The Wake Up Show Chicago. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. It's The Wake Up Show every Saturday morning at 9.